The world of Formula One racing is dominated by Bo Brandenburg as he continues to win every race that he participates in. But one day he comes across a new young foe, who is faster and better than him. Jimmy Bly. Jimmy Bly consecutively wins every race against Bo Brandenburg. Leaving Bo in second place, he dominates the world of Formula One racing, which gains him fame, money, and glory. As he reaches the top, he meets thousands of people and paparazzi, which makes him uncomfortable, as he does not appreciate the fact that every 10 seconds he receives a kiss from one of his fangirls. He is blinded by the flashes from the cameras of the paparazzi, but he continues to smile, as these people are the only ones who will turn his name into a brand. Bo is more determined than ever to defend his title of world champion against Jimmy. He takes extreme measures to remove every distraction in his life. He even dumps his fiancée because he thinks that she is a distraction. During lap number 193, Bo is in first place, more focused than ever, whereas Jimmy is in third place, overshadowed by the peer pressure from his racing team and fans. Jimmy manages to take second place, but as he approaches Bo, his heart starts pounding and his emotions overcome him. His right front tire touches the back tire of Bo's car, which breaks all the road grip that Jimmy's car possessed, resulting in his car spinning, and because of this, he cannot even finish the race. After the race, Jimmy's older brother angrily interrogates him about his awful race. In response, Jimmy tells him how anxious he feels when he sees all of his fans. Jimmy thought it would be easy to handle the fame, but turns out it is not. Jimmy feels even more helpless when his older brother forces him to face the public. But Jimmy's older brother wants the best for him. He reminds Jimmy about how skilled a driver he has been since childhood, when he defeated kids twice his age at go-karting. Carl Henry, the owner of the race team that Jimmy Bly is a part of, calls a new racer to replace his current teammate in the Toronto Molson Indy. The name of the new racer is Joe Tanto, a former legend and a champion of the racing world. He was nicknamed the Hummer because of his skills. As soon as Joe reaches the racetrack, he meets Bo. But Bo is not excited by his visit, rather he seems very annoyed. Joe meets Bo's ex-fiancée, Sophia. When Joe informs Bo that he is making a comeback by racing again for Carl, Bo reminds him of the car crash that happened because of Joe in Detroit back in 1997. He also makes Joe recall that this accident nearly ended his life. Carl introduces Joe to the sponsors of his team, and to a journalist named Lucretia Jones. As Joe and Carl are talking, Carl briefs Joe about the situation of Jimmy Bly, and the difficulties that he has been facing recently. He assures Joe that he will mentor him, and will teach him how to handle the racing world. Joe's initial reaction is not very pleasant when he hears how things are going to be, and he is about to walk out, because he came here under the impression that he was called to race. But Carl reminds him that Joe owes him, for all the help that he has been giving him over the past 6 years. Joe, all geared up, sits in the Formula One car to show the rest of the team his skills. Jimmy Bly and Lucretia are also watching him. Joe drops 4 coins on the road and picks them up through the tires of his car, without losing a millisecond of speed. He does all this with a calm mind. At this point, Jimmy is stunned and impressed when he sees Joe doing all this while humming and not even breaking a sweat. This shows Jimmy how confident and relaxed Joe is when he races. After the run, Joe pulls up to the pit stop and meets Jimmy. After a quick chat with Joe, Jimmy's older brother takes him to a public interview. To clear his mind, Jimmy goes to a club, and as he is sipping a bottle of beer, he sees Sophia. On the other hand, Joe is having a chat with Luke, short for Lucretia. Luke, with her keenness, wants to know everything about Joe, but Joe is not very pleased about her being so nosy and curious. After a quick apology by Luke, they go back to being normal. Jimmy, over at the club, approaches Sophia and comforts her about her recent breakup. Sophia misunderstands his intentions, as she thinks that Jimmy wants to date her, but Jimmy assures her that he just wants a friend. It is race day in Toronto, and every racer is geared up. Almost 250,000 people are expected to watch this race. Joe meets his ex, Kathy, who makes Joe feel bad about himself, as Kathy is married to a friend and rival of Joe in the racing world, Memo. Memo loves Joe and strolls around with him, as both of them are old friends. Memo jokes about his marriage and shares some sentiments with him that he wants to enjoy his real life, not his racing life. Sophia walks down with Jimmy, which angers Demile, the older brother. Before the race starts, Joe wishes Jimmy good luck, and the race begins. Due to an accident in the early game, all the racers are forced to pit stop. Jimmy, Bo, and Joe are the first to leave the pit stop. Jimmy tries to find an opening to overtake Bo, but he cannot seem to find it. But after countless efforts, he finally overtakes Bo and comes into first position. Jimmy finds it really difficult to maintain his first position, and this is very noticeable. Bo wants to use this to his advantage. But then out of nowhere, Carl calls Joe for a pit stop. Joe knows that his car does not need a pit stop, and Carl just wants to find a way to stall Joe. After what seems like the longest pit stop ever, Joe is enraged, and his blood is boiling. When coming out of the pit stop, he makes a sharp cut which puts him exactly in between Jimmy and Bo. Even though he is a lap behind the others, he realizes that this is the strategy of Carl, who wants Joe to act like a barrier between every other racer, and Jimmy Bly. The checkered flag goes up, and Jimmy Bly wins the race, all because of Joe Tanto. After the race, a disappointed Joe ignores Carl when he congratulates him. Every reporter at the interview wants to know Bo's opinion about the cut that Joe made, but Bo does not protest. Jimmy, who was always anxious behind the cameras and the public, is now acting more confident than ever. He quotes Demile's sayings to the reporters, and is the happiest he's ever been. While getting back to his car, Jimmy is stopped by Joe, as he wants to have a chat, but Demile does not allow it and orders Jimmy to get in the car. In the car, Demile explains to Jimmy that if he wins this race, then he will be worth a lot, and every brand will be after him for endorsement deals. All this talk about money forces Sophia to argue with Demile, but when Demile eventually gets rude, Jimmy stops him. The location for the next race is in Japan, and Jimmy is happier than ever when Sophia is around. He and Sophia share a wholesome moment, and Sophia expresses to Jimmy that Bo is also like him. According to Sophia, he may look cold on the outside, but he is scared on the inside. On the other hand, Bo and Joe cross paths with each other. After some quick threats thrown by Bo, he asks Joe for some advice, as he misses Sophia. Joe replies with the suggestion that he should go back to her and talk to her. He specifically advises him to forget about his pride. This moment shows that even though Bo does not like Joe, he still trusts his advice and considers him a formidable foe. Entering the racetrack, Jimmy faces what he struggles with every time. People touching him without his consent, everybody chanting, screaming, and calling out his name, endless crowds, and the paparazzi. Bo, on the other hand, realizes Sophia's worth. He picks up a wedding ring for her and recalls all of the moments that he shared with her, their first kiss, their endless drives. Bo comes to the realization that he feels complete when Sophia is with him. The race begins, and Jimmy is in the lead. Nearly 120,000 people are watching this race up close. Bo tries his best to intimidate Jimmy, but minutes later, with his amazing driving skills, he finally overtakes Jimmy and snatches the lead from him. Jimmy becomes desperate for the lead and tries his level best to find an opening. Even after countless warnings from Carl, he overdrives the car. This results in the car's suspension getting loose, and the back tires begin to drift. Jimmy starts to hyperventilate, and his vision and hearing get blurry. As the peer pressure is increasing, a turn is approaching Jimmy. With no time to waste, Jimmy slams his car into the wall, leaving the crowd breathless. The safety vehicles quickly rush towards the accident site. They pull Jimmy out of the car and he waves to the crowd, reassuring them that he is fine. In Chicago, the team is attending a car event, as Jimmy, Demile, and Sophia are walking down the stairs. Demile states a bunch of rules that Jimmy must obey, as according to him, important people are attending his event, which may benefit Jimmy's career. Joe and Luke are approached by Kathy, who makes Joe feel bad about himself, ruining the night for him. As Jimmy and Sophia are walking together, Jimmy gets stopped for an interview, and as he is answering the questions, he sees Sophia getting approached by Bo. Jimmy ditches the interview and darts towards Sophia. After getting to know the situation a bit, Jimmy and Bo start arguing. As the situation gets heated, Demile quickly goes to Jimmy and takes him away. Bo apologizes to Sophia and confides in her that he misses her, on which Sophia reciprocates his sentiment. But when she looks over to Jimmy, she realizes that this will break his heart. However, the truth is that deep down, Bo is still in her heart. She never moved on from him. Demile tells Jimmy to handle this situation somewhere else, just not here. Sophia walks over to Jimmy and apologizes. Jimmy, with his disappointed eyes, asks her to leave. But as she's walking away from him, Jimmy calls her, and as he is about to grab her hand to stop her, Bo pushes Jimmy away, which puts everybody's eyes on them. This stops Jimmy, but not Bo. Bo continues to push him multiple times, satisfying his pride and dominance. Angered by this incident, Jimmy gets into one of the Formula One cars that are on display and drives away. Joe has seen enough and wants to act. Only this time, he runs to the second Formula One car that is on display and drives away, chasing Jimmy. Jimmy prevails on the streets of Chicago with his Formula One car, breaking every glass in sight, and as he rides with the speed of lightning, Joe follows him with the same courage and attitude. After facing driving under trailers, wires, and multiple freeways, Joe finally catches up to Jimmy. The police are also en route to their location. Joe constantly requests Jimmy to pull over, but he seems almost heartless, and with his morbid emotions, he continues to drive. After a massive and dangerous pursuit, Joe finally manages to stop Jimmy. Angered, Jimmy asks Joe why he cares, and what he knows about Jimmy. Joe comforts him that he knows about the pressure that Demile put on Jimmy, and in his search to find an escape from that pressure, he met Sophia, and thought that she was the escape. Because of this, Jimmy is acting the way he is now. Speechless, Jimmy looks at Joe. Joe explains to him the significance of faith. He gives Jimmy the first trophy that he won, and admits to him that this was the only trophy that he felt joy in earning, as there was no peer pressure to win when he got it. He tells Jimmy that he is an excellent and talented driver, but he has to have enough faith and will, so that he can move on forward, no matter what. The second last race of the season is held in Germany. Bo has the lead for the title of the world champion, and Jimmy Bly is in second position. Both Jimmy and Joe received a fine of $25,000 from the racing commissioner for their joyride in downtown Chicago. Carl notices that Jimmy has learned to be happier around others, and Joe is serving Jimmy as a perfect mentor, whereas Joe is starting to fall in love with Luke. Before the race, Carl tells Joe that he is bringing back Memo to race with Jimmy, and if Jimmy does not win this race, then he is out, and Joe is also out with him. The race is about to start, and Memo, being the clown, jokes around Joe and Jimmy to loosen up the situation. Just before the race, Jimmy goes to Bo, and on inquiry tells him that he wants to apologize. Bo tells Jimmy that he should apologize to him by himself. All geared up, Joe gives Jimmy some advice on how he should deal with Bo on track. A storm approaches the track, and the rain is pouring from the sky. The drivers are set, and the engines are roaring. The race has begun, and Bo starts in the pole position. Right after him, in second position, is Jimmy Bly. As Memo is also back, he assists Jimmy with all his might. Memo glides past through racers and continues to overtake anything in sight, which makes the crowd go bananas over him. Bo continues to maintain his position during the race, which troubles Jimmy. Due to the rain, both of the racers cannot see much, but Jimmy continues to ride in Bo's blind spot. Laps are proceeding, and racers are crashing. Up till now, this has been the most hazardous race of the season, as the rain is pouring hard. With patience, practice, and help from Joe, Jimmy finally manages to snatch the lead from Bo as he overtakes him at a turn, leaving everybody in shock. More laps go on, and more drivers face brutal crashes. Bo takes the high ground and moves past Jimmy like a fighter jet, while Joe pushes Jimmy to have patience. On the other hand, Memo rides like thunder over the racetrack, and moves past every racer in sight. He wants to catch up to Jimmy and Bo. Despite countless warnings, Memo continues to move forward, and now he is side by side with Jimmy, with inches of gap between their cars. Jimmy tells Memo to back off, and Carl yells and orders him to stop. But stubborn Memo attempts to ride past Jimmy. Their tires touch, and Memo loses control. His car slams into the wall and is now airborne. As he comes back to the ground, another car hits him, which launches him far away from the track, and his car explodes. Jimmy quickly slams the brakes, which spins his car, but quickly he gains momentum and starts going in the opposite direction, over to Memo. The emergency vehicles and ambulance also rush towards Memo's accident site. Jimmy sees that Memo's car is upside down in the river, and he is strapped to it. Jimmy, with all his strength, flips the car. He holds Memo, but his foot gets stuck in the debris. Meanwhile, on the racetrack, Sophia updates Bo about the situation, and Bo also stops his car and heads over to Memo's crash site. Bo reaches the site and swims through the river to reach them. The fuel tank of Memo's vehicle is leaking, and all of the fuel is floating on the water. With the combined strength of Jimmy and Bo, they finally manage to flip Memo's car, but struggle to take Memo out, as Memo himself does not even have the strength to raise his finger. After their fair share of struggle, they manage to pull Memo out, and quickly try to rescue him from the water. When suddenly, a branch that was on fire drops on the fuel, resulting in a huge explosion. But luckily, all three of them are safe. The safety vehicles finally reach the site and pull all three of them out of the river. At the hospital, Memo is not in danger, but in bad condition. Joe and Jimmy are with him. Jimmy's leg is wounded, but he sits with Memo and Joe, where Memo thanks him for saving him. Later on, Sophia and Bo also visit Jimmy at the hospital. There, Bo shares with Jimmy that he was impressed by his decision to save Memo at the risk of his own life. Joe, on the other hand, watches the crashed car, which reminds him of his very own car crash. Carl emerges from the shadows with his wheelchair. He breaks the news to Joe that he will be terminating Jimmy's contract because of his heroic act of saving Memo and ditching the race. On the other hand, Demille sells out Jimmy and starts to work for Bo. Jimmy is unaware of everything that is happening, but he eventually learns it all through Sophia. He rushes to Demille and confronts him about this, but Demille argues that Jimmy cut him off first, when he started prioritizing his time with Joe. Demille decisively states to Jimmy that he is not going down with him, and that he deserves much better, and walks away. It is the final race day at Detroit, and with the pleasant sunny weather, everybody is excited for the race. Demille has no respect as a manager with Bo and Sophia. Demille, with no self-respect, asks Sophia to punch him, if that would make her feel better. And she does punch him, leaving him with a bloody nose. On the other hand, Carl won't let Jimmy race until he clears the physical tests, which are to get out of the car in 5 seconds and to make 10 vertical jumps on his bad foot. After clearing these tasks with pure will, he manages to get back into the race. Jimmy visits Sophia and Bo before the race to thank Sophia. Tanks are full and helmets are on. The final race for the Grand Prix is about to commence. Joe is going to be Jimmy's teammate in this race. Bo starts in the first pole position, and Joe starts in the 10th, whereas Jimmy starts in the 26th pole position. He has 100 laps to catch up to Bo to become the world champion. The green flag has been raised, and the race has begun. Cars with their roaring engines are sliding past each other. Suddenly 2 cars crash right in front of Joe's car, which destroys the front wing of his car, but he quickly goes to the pit stop to get it repaired. But the yellow flag is raised for only 1 lap. Because of this, Joe gains the last position with Jimmy, and as the green flag is raised, both of them agree to work together. Both of them work together for the first time and start to race. They glide past positions and are quickly catching up. They are doing all this while making fun of each other. Both of them ride past cars at an insane amount of speed. Jimmy glides past through cars, and Joe follows. Their skills and teamwork leave the crowd in shock, as everybody is flabbergasted about their progress. At the 50th lap, both of them take up a side and accelerate their car with maximum thrust, resulting in them almost catching up to Bo. Only 20 laps are remaining, and Jimmy Bly is in the 7th position, and Joe is in 6th. Bo is still dominating the race with his first position. The car at the 2nd position loses control and crashes, leaving all the cars behind it to crash. This creates a major problem for Joe and Jimmy, but both of them manage to glide past through the crash site. Jimmy and Joe are at the pit stop, and they are in 2nd and 3rd position. After the quickest pit stop in the race, all three of them are back to racing. Jimmy tails Bo to find an opening that excites the crowds. After 2 failed attempts, he finally manages to gain enough momentum to overtake Bo, and he snatches the lead from him. Only 4 laps are remaining, but due to Jimmy being nervous, Bo takes back the lead. Only 3 laps are left, and everybody has given up, when suddenly Carl hears humming from his microphone, due to which he only smiles. Joe, the hummer, Tanto is back, as he glides past Jimmy, and with an amazing turn comes just in front of Bo. Only 2 laps are remaining, and he is in the lead, but suddenly his suspension starts loosening, and his car is not in good shape. He commands Jimmy to take the lead, and brakes. Now only 1 lap is remaining, and Jimmy Bly and Bo Brandenburg are side by side. As Jimmy feels the pressure, Joe reassures him. And surprisingly, Jimmy starts humming. Going at lightning speed, he manages to win the race just by inches. Coming in 1st position, Jimmy Bly becomes the world champion, followed by Bo and Joe. The whole crowd is surprised, and the sky is filled with confetti. Carl thanks Joe, and Jimmy appreciates Bo for his skills. Bo is an arrogant man, but he loves nothing more than Sophia, so he smiles and proceeds to kiss the love of his life. Whereas Jimmy Bly continues to cheer for himself, as he just became the world champion. Demel sees his brother and claps for him. At the hospital, Memo is also filled with joy after seeing them both win. The commentators announce Jimmy's name, and he receives the gold trophy. Then they announce Bo's name. He raises his trophy in the air and gives a flying kiss to Sophia. Joe is excitedly standing with Luke, and as his name gets called out, he also rushes to the stage to collect his trophy. Jimmy holds Joe tightly and thanks him for everything. Joe smiles and hugs Jimmy. All 3 of those on the stage seem like the happiest men ever, as all of them got what they wanted. This moment of ecstasy is celebrated by all 3 of them together. Then they proceed to throw champagne at each other. Jimmy meets his brother's eye and smiles. Joe looks over at Luke. Bo glances at Sophia and winks, as all 3 of them stand together happily, to capture this moment in their hearts forever.